God is saying to Moses, I will be with you. But the evidence, in a moment I'll come to the evidence in a different way. The first thing he says, I will be with you, and the evidence is when you are worshiping me, when you've gone through the trouble, when you've come into the victory, when you're into the land, when you possess the land, I will be the evidence that through the whole time I was in control. I led, I spoke, I am. That's not the first time God is saying, I am. And I think we have to realize that in retrospect, when we look back, and this is the advantage that I have after 70 years of ministry. And I like to remind people, I'm not celebrating 70 years of age. I've gone a long way past that. I'm celebrating 70 years of full-time ministry. And so amongst all people, I have the privilege of looking back. And the one thing that I'm conscious of as I look back over my life, every step, every decision, everything that happened was part of God's plan and God's purpose, to the extent that looking back, I need to give God the glory and thank Him for what He has done in my life. It's beyond my wildest dreams, what God has accomplished and what God has done. So that this is the evidence of God. It's in the retrospect when we look back and when we see the evidence is here now. And I want you to have that evidence and sense that evidence in your life now of the power and the presence of God. I mean, when I said that God had called me to go to Israel, people didn't believe me. Even my own father prayed against it until 3 weeks before I left, when he finally changed his prayer. And yet that was to change the whole course of my life. I wouldn't be where I am now if I had not made that journey in 1961. It's the same when God called me to the Karlsruhe conferences in 1988. I got the vision in 1986 that I had to see the power of God and the move of the Holy Spirit sweep through the Iron Curtain. It was impossible. People refused to support me. I had so much criticism, but I knew that God had called me to do it. And what has happened now in Ukraine with these days of prayer, the evangelism in Siberia, and the whole of my life really hinged on what I did then. If I'd not done that, I would not be standing here today. Do you understand? I knew, and God knew, but the people didn't. So the strange thing is this, when you begin to look down and you see that. So Moses is saying, Lord, when I tell the people, they won't believe that you have sent me. So how does God overcome that? They'll say that they will even deny that you've heard the voice of God. And they'll say, God hasn't appeared to you, you're wrong. So the answer from the Lord was very quick in verse 2. The Lord said to Moses, what is it you've got in your hand? Come on, what is it you've got in your hand? Well, what did he have? The only thing he had in his hand at that moment was his staff. He was a shepherd, he had the staff. And so the Lord says, he says, throw it on the ground. And immediately that rod became a serpent. And then Moses is told by the Lord, put out your hand and take the serpent by the tail. Now, come on, I'm sure you know enough that the last thing you do is pick up a snake by its tail, because when you do, that snake will swing straight round and bite you, poison you and maybe kill you. If you've got any sense, you take it by the head or the neck. So what God was telling Moses to do, firstly, was impossible. And secondly, it was to become the miracle, because when Moses did that, then this vicious, poisonous snake became a rod. And then the second one, immediately after in verse 4, the Lord said to Moses, take your hand, put it inside your jacket, And when he put it in and pulled it out, it was leprous. Phew. And then God says, put it back, and he put it back, and it became clean. Now, what's the significance of this? The significance is that God confirms his word through the miraculous. And you know, I think that's one thing about my ministry that's been so evident, is that God has always backed me up by miracles and signs and wonders.